This is the Gold Newsletter Podcast, your home for investment, economics, and geopolitics. For our publications and archives, go to goldnewsletter.com. Folks, welcome to the Gold Newsletter Podcast. This is your host, Fergus Hodgson. Always pleased to be with you. Thanks for tuning in. And I have on the line Brad DeVos, and we will be exploring why philosophy or political economy matters to business people. In 2009, he devoted his intellect to economics, business, and philanthropy, and he began working with the Bastiat Society in Charleston, South Carolina. Beautiful little city. Man, what a precious place.
It's not a bad place to live.
The opening stanza of the War Between the States began there. Anyway, that's a side issue. So he has become the manager.
We call it the recent unpleasantness in Charleston.
The recent unpleasantness.
Yeah, Charlestonians have a very passive-aggressive way of explaining things and talking about things, and so instead of the war between the states, the Civil War, they often refer to it as the most recent unpleasantness, which I think is pretty funny.
I'm trying to be neutral with my description, but there seems to be no way to go about it. Yeah. So he holds a BS in economics, BA in urban studies from the College of Charleston, as well as an associate's degree in computer-aided design and drafting. He's also a member of the Plunders Society, and he is a graduate of the Atlas Think Tank Leadership Academy. So plenty else to say about him, but the key is he is leading or managing the Bastiat Society. Now, rather than me tell people what that is, why don't you give us your explanation?
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you for having me on the podcast. I really appreciate you including me in this. The Bastiat Society was started in 2004 by two business people from Charleston. Actually, one was from Charleston and one was from Columbia, South Carolina.
Okay.
And their frustration was that there was all this academic content out there that defended business and capitalism, and then on the other side of it were these capitalists and business people who really couldn't defend themselves. They couldn't explain why trade was moral and why capitalism is the way to go. And they were frustrated by seeing their colleagues and their peers become, apologetic, successful, but be apologetic about it. Saying, well, I give back and I give back to the community, but they had no really good way of sort of defending themselves in a very philosophical manner, and so they were just subject to attack, and the frustration and led to the idea of what if there was a business network or at least a business discussion group in Charleston that raised the economic awareness within the business community. And so they thought of the Bastiat Society as being perhaps maybe a conduit between the academic community, the thinkers in society, and the business community, the doers in society, and just to see where that would lead. We all, us people who think about these sort of things have a stack of books, next to our bed that we're never going to get to. So the content is there, and we have a plethora of content, but we just didn't have the distribution network to bring these ideas to the business community. And there seems to be sort of a divide between academics and business people. I mean, they're kind of skeptical of each other. Business people don't understand academics or philosophy, and business people think that academics are just sitting at the high towers and they don't really understand the practicality of running a business. And so we thought, what if there was this intermediary group that sort of facilitated this discussion? And that's where we started. And it was in 2004, and I came on board in 2009 to help the Charleston group. It was just in Charleston at that time. Grow and become more stable, and by 2011 we were running pretty efficiently, and we were self-sustaining, and we had interest from other parts of the country and the world to maybe duplicate our efforts. And so between 2011 and now, we're up to close to 30 chapters around the world right now, hosting about 120 events a year. And so we think we're onto something here, and we just want to keep it going.
That's wonderful. I could not agree more with that problem there, that I am shocked often when I see business people sharing this almost guilty sentiment for doing what they do. It's just bizarre.
It is pervasive, though. I mean, everything you hear and read. I mean, look at all of the villains in movies. I mean, they're now corrupt business people. And so it seems like pop culture has turned against the regular business person who employs, people. And so it's a tough sort of they're kind of picking their battles. I mean, they have customers to serve and they have products to design and create. Do they really want to take on this capitalism versus anti-capitalism fight at the exact same time?
Yes, and I'm looking at your website here, just bastiatsociety.org, and you've got chapters all over the place, including one here in Ireland, in Northern Ireland, or not in the Republic, but on the island.
Right, that's a brand new one.
Yeah, the majority seem to be in the United States, naturally. And if anyone does not know, where the name Bastiat comes from, it's from Frédéric Bastiat, who was a French political economist of the 19th century, and his most famous work is The Law. If you've not read that, get onto it. It is just a canon of classical liberalism, a wonderful, brief or concise book, and one of my favorites. You were not involved with the naming of the organization, were you?
No, but I understand the reasoning. I mean, Frédéric Bastiat was I would call him the first economics blogger. He didn't really create any new thought. He was just sort of trying to make sense of Marx and Adam Smith and this debate that was raging in Europe in the early 1800s. And so he was just distilling these ideas down to something that the average person could understand. And through his many, I think he wrote over 1 million words in the last 15 years of his life. But his frustration was the same as ours, which is that these ideas seem right. There seems to be right and wrong ideas, but the average person is not being addressed or engaged. So, he even started his own. When people wouldn't publish his ideas, he and his friend started their own pamphlet company and printing press and distributed these ideas by hand throughout Paris. And so we kind of saw ourselves as taking up that mantle and taking now 150, 200 years of economic thought and actually bringing it to the business community.
Yeah, on an earlier episode, we had a specialist in higher education, and we examined how, there's a bubble that is deflating in higher education, or a problem of higher education becoming impractical, or just lots of issues there. But one of them was that what they actually produce, the academic content, is so inaccessible and just not read by anyone, really. And I think that relates to your earlier point that the discussions going on within the professional academic community, they're not. There's very little bridge, and it's funny too, because I remember back earlier, prominent thinkers such as Milton Friedman made a great effort to engage in the wider public debates. But it seems now, for example, in my field of economics, which I studied at Boston University, the field is so technical, so mathematical. It's almost as though these professionals would not know how to communicate their ideas to a broader audience. And so there is this canyon. What about the role that think tanks are basically filling this gap?
Well, I hope that I think what we're trying to do is engage the think tanks to help improve the marketing, the marketing of these ideas, and that's sort of how we're looking at it. Is we have sort of this production cycle of ideas. I mean, I almost wouldn't expect scholars and academics to be the best people to communicate these ideas. Honestly, it's almost like having an automotive design team also being asked to sell the car on the showroom floor. I mean, it's a different skill set there, and we need to think about these sort of things as a production cycle. And we start with the academics and the raw materials, and we have to filter these through think tanks and policy groups and discussion groups like the Bastiat Society to get down to the customers, which are the people at large, the general population. So the incentive structure in the academy is not set up to going out and talking to the Rotary Club or talking to the Chamber of Commerce or talking to a business group. It's set up to publishing more papers and becoming better at what you do and designing better ideas. So I don't blame them. We sort of recognize that as a fact and are sort of reaching across there and saying, you're the expert, so help us with our marketing. Help us market these ideas better to the people who can actually execute them.
What about the problem that so many businessmen, let's be frank, are cronies? And I remember last year I went for a trip to Paraguay, and I was chatting with the classical liberal community there, and we were discussing whether there's a way to enter the market, and they were just saying that all the businessmen, it's just de facto in a country like that, are cronies, and so there's no one really to back you. So sometimes it's almost as though businessmen may not want to know about a free market because it would be maybe there's a maladaptive or a perverse incentive there.
Yeah, well, the divide also occurs there, and so academics exist in this ideological world, but a business person who's operating here in Ecuador or in Peru or even in the United States for that matter, or even in the EU, has to deal with the reality that they're not living in a free market economy. They're living in a mixed economy. And so I don't blame them for taking handouts and for working that angle, but it would be better if they understood that angle was, in the long run, detrimental to society. And that's where we would start. We wouldn't want to start casting stones right away and calling them cronies and dismissing them, because that's just going to breed more cronies, I guess. I mean, you can't just ignore them. You can't ignore those who don't know what they don't know. And so our idea is just to approach them and say, we get why you're doing it, but understand also that in the long run, this is not going to work out very well. And here's all the history and here's all the information to support that. And maybe on the margin, they'll start making better decisions.
Yeah, one of the other challenges I think you're addressing or facing is that there's just a natural tendency for different types of people to maybe the term is birds of a feather flock together, and people in government positions are, for lack of a better term, controlling people. It's just their nature, right? So you and I, we don't like bureaucracy. We like a dynamic, thriving environment where there's room to move and be creative. That just isn't really government. So we over time, the two communities of business communities and government just evolve in different directions, and so there's this divide. Do you recommend people in business actually consider embedding themselves or getting involved in the government process?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's one of the best ways to reduce cronyism. If you're a principled business person, join the Regulatory Review Commission in your state, or run for city council. Heck, I mean, even be the housing authority or something like that. Join something that has some control over some political budget, and you're doing your part to not only, Calvin Coolidge once said, it's not only important to pass good laws, it's probably more important to prevent bad ones. And so if you put yourself in these sort of commissions, these smaller sort of, if the business people who are practical embed themselves in politics that way, at a very practical level, they can prevent a lot of bad things from happening. And it's one thing to say, my competitor down the street is a crony and he's just looking for government handouts. Well, embed yourself in government. Try your best to prevent those handouts from being even available.
Right. I hear you, because whenever I've worked in think tanks and I've been to all these legislative hearings, and sometimes I just think it's like torturous. It's a masochistic activity, but it's going on, and so either you get involved or someone else is going to. So it's a tricky situation there. Yeah, and as you said, the success of the Bastiat Society speaks for itself. The proof is in the pudding, and that there is this niche market there, or gap in the market. And I personally have looked at starting a chapter. I didn't know about the Bastiat Society so much, but this one called Liberty on the Rocks, which is somewhat related, because when you move to an area, it's just helpful to have other people who share this challenge. They want to get on with business. They recognize the regulatory burden, and they want to somehow work together to resolving this predicament.
Right. I'm sorry. I was just going to say, I mean, our dream is you drive into any country or city or region in the world, and you see a Rotary Club or Chamber of Commerce medallion someplace, or that those sort of groups exist. But we'd also like to know that a Bastiat Society exists wherever you are in the world. And so if you happen to move to a different city, you can immediately get plugged into a community of business people who agree with you and are like-minded. And I think that would really accelerate an anti-cronyist sort of movement.
Yeah, so there is a new one in Ireland, and is the one you're going to, is that, I know you're in Quito right now, but is the chapter in Guayaquil, the business hub of Ecuador?
We have, the chapter is based out of Quito. They do programs in both Guayaquil and Quito. It's more of Latin America is a little bit different. I mean, the older business community, I would say those 50 and above, they're pretty entrenched, and their whole livelihood exists because of handouts and cronyism. And so while they support the ideas, it's really going to be the younger business people, the 25-year-olds who are just starting and can't get those favors out the gates. And so our chapters in Latin America tend to be very young, millennial sort of age business people who are looking to bypass government and be successful without handouts.
Right. That is a predicament, yeah. So because the younger generation, of course, we're so much more accustomed to a dynamic, innovative economy. I mean, this is what the world is facing, and so there's much more of us we're more accustomed to this rapidly changing environment. But why don't you explain to me too how this is, I hate to say it, financially sustainable? I assume there are membership fees.
Yeah, each chapter. The reason that we are financially, sustainable is that each of our chapters are responsible for their own budget, and so they raise money however they can. Usually, local chapters have a membership, or they find sponsorship from the business community at the local level. The international organization has a very meager budget. We're trying to be as bottom up as possible, and so we have funding through major grants and foundations for our programs that we run, and we're testing throughout our chapters. And essentially, that's how we're funded, is just through philanthropic support at the international level. But if there's a chapter near you, we really encourage you to support that local chapter, because those are our boots on the ground. And
do you want to share some success stories? I mean, I hope you have some. So with these 30-odd chapters, have you seen any actual, maybe prominent business people who have come into the fold and had somewhat of a conversion and then actually had an impact both on policy level or just the public debate?
Well, it's tough to see, the direct impact, but what we are learning now after 5 years of doing this is that, business people are very humble people, and they may sit in the back of the room and seem like they're just a regular old guy in a blazer, but they may have, they may be the vice president of, consumer loans at Bank of America, with, tens of thousands of people underneath their watch, or they may, be on the regulatory review committee of a state, and that's sort of what we're seeing, is that we're bringing people in off the street who haven't been exposed to these ideas because their friends said, "Hey, this is an interesting discussion group. Just come with me," and then they stick around. And so it's tough to see the direct impact, but we have to be, I guess, humble enough to know that they're taking these ideas and applying them, and we do know that they are applying. I mean, for instance, our chapter director in Panama, who was running a discussion group, was appointed to be the managing director of the free trade zone in Colón, Panama, which is the second largest free trade zone in the world besides Hong Kong. So he's dealing with global trade as a cabinet level position in Panama, but he's also been involved in the Bastiat Society from the very beginning. So we think that they're applying them. The success stories are sort of pretty abstract, but we're starting to see some real good examples of that. He's actually our chairman right now. His name is Sir Spearpoint.
Right.
He was an import-export manager in Panama for a very long time, and been involved in these ideas for quite a while. And because of his involvement in these sort of ideas, I believe is how he said. Well, he first off, he was very hesitant to accept this role because he didn't want to become a government bureaucrat. But then he thought back on all what he's been preaching for the last several years and said, this is the way for me to actually apply my knowledge and do good. So he accepted and is now doing that.
Yeah, Mitsur at an event in Guatemala, we were discussing precisely that sort of thing, these special zones, such as he's dealing with in Panama. And that, I hate to do this to you, but I want to flip the question to some degree. When I worked in North Carolina, I assume you know a man called Art Pope or the Pope family. They're strong philanthropists and business people in the state. And one of the ironies is this no good deed goes unpunished problem, where they have devoted enormous amounts of their personal wealth to promoting freedom in the state, giving to charitable causes, promoting more accountable higher education, all these wonderful things. And yet they've become a target for lots of retribution. And a lot of people, for example, don't want to receive their charity, whatever. It's almost like putting a target on yourself. Have people faced retribution for their involvement in the organization or for basically becoming politically active?
Well, that's another major problem. I mean, you don't want to be the tall poppy in the field, right? Because you get your head lopped off. That's sort of the phrase that we use. So if you're in a group of business people in your own town, you can speak with one voice, and it's a little bit easier. But yes, major philanthropists on both sides are the ones who stick their necks out, and we really appreciate what they do, because they're taking one for the team, as we say. But we think that the Bastiat Society can serve as a role as diffusing that retribution, I guess, and you can say it's not just me; it's the 20 or 40 of these business leaders in the community who all agree with me. Are asking for this change or for you to consider these things. So I think we can serve a purpose there too, but it's definitely a major concern for when you get too outspoken. You divide the room before you can even make your point. And for business people, that can be a very costly thing, because you can alienate customers. But I think if you can present our ideas in a positive, non-political way, one that's more of a story of success and human flourishing, then you avoid a lot of these retributions. Because I don't know if the progressives and the lefts of the world really have a way to attack a positive story about human flourishing and peace and prosperity. And that's sort of where we focus most of our energy is helping our chapters and helping our members hone that, I guess, argument, so they can be, I guess they can avoid that sort of retribution.
One person that comes to mind in this regard is John Mackey. I'm sure you're familiar with, the founder of Whole Foods, right? He's been I guess at this point he's not worrying so much about the money. He's taken on more of a figurehead role, and he, as you well know, he had made this public op-ed. I'm not sure where it was published, maybe even the New York Times, somewhere prominent, and he criticized socialized medical care and said this is the wrong way to go. That as a thriving nation, we've been promoting physical health, not sick care. And people really did go about boycotting his store. And I'm not sure whether it hurt him a lot or a little bit, but it was a noticeable pushback. And so, yeah, he was sticking his neck out where other people really wouldn't go. But I'm not sure if you want to comment on his case personally or specifically.
Well, I don't want to comment on his case specifically, but I wish that the academic community and the business community were in a position to rally around people who do that and support them. Essentially, we have a history of sort of letting them face the wolves alone, and I wish that more business people would have came to his aid. And I wish that more business people would come to the aid of Charles Koch or you name an Art Pope from North Carolina. I wish that they wouldn't just let them stick their necks out all by themselves, but support them and encourage them and be more outspoken about it. Because, like I said, if it's just one person, then they're the ones who are going to be attacked. But if it's a dozen or 40 local business people who are all arguing the exact same thing, it diffuses it's harder for them to sort of attack. So I think there's one thing that the business community can do is be a little bit more outspoken, but be outspoken in the right way. be a voice of promise and optimism and be non-political about these sort of arguments, because I think the cheap shots come on the political side, and they don't really know how to react when a business person talks about economic freedom bringing prosperity and human flourishing to the community. And that would be my 2 cents on that. Does that make any sense?
No, I agree totally. I'm not interested in this whole Republicans versus Democrats. I'm not sure what you want to call it. Just this back and forth. There's these attacks on each other, which don't really discuss ideas, but discuss personalities too much. And I think you're right that if you focus on the issues, that's a way to somewhat disarm people, right? So that we don't get into these ad hominem attacks. One other topic which I suspect will become a growing challenge or area of interest for your society is that many people like me choose to become more mobile and take their businesses in a digital realm. Is there a Bastiat Society that is not located or that is just digital, purely digital, right? So many people, I know other very libertarian people who actually travel all the time. They're basically permanent tourists and have just business online. How would that, is there a group that is just, let's say, they just discusses things in a digital fashion?
Well, I have a pretty strong Facebook following. I don't really know if we're going to ever do a digital meetup group or something like that. That's actually an interesting idea. We have some things in the works to be more of a distribution platform for written content through a website. So that might be coming. But our focus right now has been to fill that niche in the local ground, to the local markets to create discussion groups. Like I said, there's lots of content online. There's lots of Facebook groups and lots of content that you can get access to. But our comparative advantage right now is to create these in-person discussion groups that meet regularly. But I like the idea of a virtual sort of meeting that can occur maybe quarterly or something like that.
Well, I just say that because I know many young people, whether they're struggling to get established as business people or even employment, whatever it may be, they will migrate. They become very, I'm not sure the term, but they will move around a lot to find opportunities, and that makes building this camaraderie and community, which I think I agree with you, is a wonderful thing, and the in-person is so much better. It may be difficult for them. And I don't know whether that trend is going to change or get more going forward.
I think it's going to be more going forward. I think we're going to be much more fluid as far as where we live and where we work. And we may live and work in different places and different continents. We may live and work in multiple continents every year. But that's why I think our goal is to have a chapter in every city in the country and in every country in the world. Would allow you to, wherever you happen to be, traveling or working or living for any duration of time, there's going to be a Bastiat chapter nearby that you can immediately connect and plug into. That's the long-term goal. So just like how the Rotary Club operates. You might move if you're a Rotary Club member or you're a member of your local Chamber of Commerce, and you pick up and move from, say, North Carolina to Italy. You're probably going to look up the local Rotary Club or Chamber of Commerce, for better or for worse, I know. But I think hopefully that same thing happens with the Bastiat study chapters. If you've been involved in one chapter and you move, you can start or join another one. And we've seen that happen between friends who live in different places and say, hey, I'm involved in the Bastiat study here in Charleston. I see that you live in L.A. or you just moved to L.A. Check out the group. They have one in L.A. And that's how chapters are gaining members now on a monthly basis by just recommendations from friends across the country and across the world, around the world.
That's great. And I should point out, folks, that there are some gaping holes in terms of locations. Canada does not have a single one, nor do Australia or New Zealand. So that is crazy.
There are some wonderful think tanks around the world, and so how we serve to help facilitate the growth of a chapter would be the chapter must be led by a business person or a group of business people, actually. So we want the target audience to be the business community, and so we think that's a natural sort of selection mechanism that if the chapter director is a business person, but they probably don't know that there's a think tank down the road that can support their effort through content. And so that's how we help them. And so if anybody who's out there lives in a city and wants to start a chapter, how we can help you is that we can put you in touch with your local think tank or your regional think tank or a national think tank that has, a presence in your area. And we can immediately supply you and your chapter with content and speakers and ideas of how you can grow your chapter. So that's how we operate from the international side.
Brad, this all sounds great to me. So, people, if you want to follow him, Brad DeVos, well, just the Twitter is Bastiat Society, but always go to, goldnewsletter.com/podcast to find the archives, all the details. This is the 33rd episode. And so we will have links to the Bastiat Society and Brad's own work. Any other final points before we let you go, Brad? Anything we missed?
No, I just want to say thank you for having me on, and I appreciate it, and it's been a great discussion.